where I see it going is instead of living our lives to optimize the equation self-worth equals net worth, I see us shifting to optimize living our lives so that we have emotional wealth plus financial health.
Hi, I'm Hilary Russo. Thanks for joining me for the HIListically Speaking Podcast. I'm a certified holistic health coach and Havening Techniques practitioner, lover of great conversation, and of course, clever wordplay, HIListically speaking. So welcome to an empowering place where my guests share their transformational stories of trauma to triumph through health, healing, and humor. It's the ultimate brain candy as we find out who we are, how we got that way, and what it takes to be a happy and healthy grown-up. And be kind to your mind. I'm glad you're here. We talk a lot about emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental health on HIListically Speaking, but how fit are your finances? Are you working out the money muscle when it comes to your future? Fortunately, we're seeing a shift in how we want to spend our time. The pandemic in the last few years have really opened our eyes when it comes to living the life we want, hasn't it? Lots of self-reflection on how we want to spend the small amount of time we really have on this big blue marble. So I ask you, does your wallet match your wants when it comes to your personal well-being? If not, how do you get there? Over the past 25 years, financial planner, advisor, and MoneyZen founder Manisha Thakor has heard that question more times than she could count. And let's face it, numbers are kind of her game. She's dedicated a big part of her life empowering women to invest well towards their futures. And no matter how much is in the bank account, the same question and fear comes up time after time with her. Will I run out of money before I run out of time? On this episode of HIListically Speaking, Manisha gets real. She not only shares how her own battles with bullying and mental health became her superpower when it comes to financial success, she also provides you with some actionable steps to help you face your financial fears and start making positive changes when it comes to investing. It's never too late. She breaks it down by decade so that you can find your own MoneyZen and turn the Great Resignation into the Great Realignment. Manisha Thakor, oh my gosh, I feel like a 5-year-old already talking to you. It's just so much fun when I get great people on HIListically Speaking, and my lady, you are one of them. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Hilary, thank you so much for having me. I'm such a fan of all of the work that you do to help us restore in this very vital part of our lives. I'm pointing to my head for anybody
She's
who...
pointing to, I was going to say, she's pointing to her head in the moment. But okay, the feeling is mutual because you first came into my presence during I think it was the Institute for Integrative Nutrition when I was first studying and getting certified as a health coach. And I saw this gal on stage talking about finances and money, which is always a scary topic, but you made it so much fun. And if you're going to put the words money and Zen together, it's got to be positive, right?
Absolutely. Well, and that's the whole idea, is to get rid of that stress, just nothing but calm and confidence and clarity around your money so it doesn't hurt your head.
Yes, definitely. So we're going into a new year. We're trying to go into this year really powerfully. We've been through this pandemic. We're still seeing residual pieces of it here and there, and people are scared, And the big thing right now is that people are talking about the Great Resignation, right? Walking away from their jobs. COVID's inspired this entire trend of quitting their jobs. Why am I spending so much time away from home and not being with my family, which is absolutely valid. In fact, I think I heard recently that like over 70% of people who are working full-time in the workplace are like, I'm done with this. I don't want to do this full-time anymore from the office space. But you've actually did this lovely transformation where you call it the Great Resignation and turned it into the Great Realignment. And I so gravitate to that. So with your work as a financial planner, financial advisor, what do you mean by that? And what does that mean for everyone that's listening?
I feel like it's not like we're resigning so much as we're saying, There is a seed in me that has been dying to be watered and blossom. And heck, I am going to start watering it. And I'm not quite sure where it's going to go. Um, but I am heading towards this rebirth, this realignment. And one of the things that I've really noticed is that a lot of us have gotten trapped into this unconsciously, generally, this cycle of living our lives to optimize the equation net worth equals self worth. And that net worth could be, in some industries, you're judging yourself. I make this much money, and that's my self worth. In other industries, it's I have this many clients, and that's my net worth. Or I have, in the fitness industry, I see this a lot. I am able to, I have this physique, and therefore that's my. And so we are linking together professional components. External components of success as defining our self-worth, and it feels like crap. And suddenly when the formal structure around our work cracked and we were able to interact with our work in a different way, we started thinking like, I don't think money, work, success is how I want to define myself. And so I think that's the realignment that's happening. And I see the where I see it going is, instead of living our lives to optimize the equation self worth equals net worth, I see us shifting to optimize living our lives so that we have emotional wealth plus financial health. And that's what I see going on right now.
And you're someone that has been doing this for quite some time. You have we're 25 years working in finances. I mean, you've been on probably in every media and featured on every TV show and in so many periodicals that are just really well respected, sharing your financial journey, sharing financial advice. And how have you seen this true transition, though? I mean, did you ever imagine that we would be in a place like this?
No, I never saw it coming in a million years. And I think that's, in the stock market, they call these black swans. If you look back at almost every major decline in the stock market, it came from something that was completely out of the blue. No, it was on nobody's radar. And I think that's how big changes happen in financial markets, and I think that's how big changes happen often in society.
I hear you on that because I walked away from a full-time job when I was a news anchor. It was 2001. I remember, well, 2002, I walked away right after 9/11. And I'm like, I don't want to be owned by anyone. I want to be in my own business. And so when the recession happened in the early part of the 2000s, when this happened, I mean, it rocked me a little bit, but for someone who has already been remote and working on my own, it was not as heavy. It's those people that are 9 to 5ers go into the office that they're like, whoa, purpose changes. Things have really shook up right now. I don't have that camaraderie of my colleagues in the office setting. And that is obviously going to take a mental impact on you as well when you're so used to that social environment. People have been struggling a lot. And I know for you, you have really based your business around really helping women find their financial independence in a lot of ways. And, that's an area that's very deep to my heart because I feel like as someone who comes from a background where I had a military background being a dependent, a lot of women are so dependent, and we're changing this on the man's finances. So how do you find your own sense of financial independence? And as you mentioned, get financially naked, which I love that. I love that term. But how does that work? How do we go that route, especially empowering women?
I used to think it was going to happen from this top down approach, that we would have, more education coming in and available to us in formal ways in high schools, in colleges, and that these formal, uh, introductions to personal finance would help us as women in particular understand that we have a couple of major headwinds that are very different than men. We, still, I cannot believe I'm saying this 25 years later, but we still earn, let's pick your methodology, collectively 80 cents on the male dollar. And if you are, Black or brown, um, and or mixed race, the numbers drop precipitously from there. We spend more years out of the paid workforce than men caring for our elderly parents and children, and yet we live longer. So we earn less money for less time, yet we need more money because we're going to last longer than the guys. And that message I now think is coming through and will only be solved from the bottom up. I'm calling it guerrilla, like GIRL, guerrilla warfare. And we're helping. What I think really will make a difference for women is one woman to another sharing something like this podcast episode. And what I find is women, we're great at sharing when we find a good resource. And when we start sharing more resources around owning uh, practical steps that we can take to own our finances and own our lives, that's when the movement's really going to start to spread out. And history bears this out. I mean, there's so many movements, major social movements in history that have started with a small group of women sharing information, and then it just grows geometrically as each woman shares with three of her girlfriends.
It's a sisterhood, right? It's
It's
totally a
exactly.
sisterhood. Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing about that is that, you and I share something where, I mean, we're both divorcees. You have all these women that are maybe in the second half of their lives are like,
Mhm.
whoa, either, and you don't have to be divorced. I mean, but there are many women out there, we're seeing divorce happening. It's on the rise. And women are starting over. And look, this is not to alienate the men out there that are listening as well, because starting over is starting over, and a divorce can be like a death in a lot of ways. So it emotionally impacts us. So whether you're going through a divorce, whether your kids are out of the house and now you have an empty nest, whether you're in the second half of your life and you're like, what do I do now? I think those are some really big, important questions that people are asking. Like, do I even have enough for retirement? And what do you think the number one fear is that people are facing as we're moving into this new, this realignment, as you call it?
Without a doubt, it's that I'm going to run out of money before I run out of years. And I've been teaching personal finance workshops at places like the Omega Institute and 1440, and for a variety of years. And I, one of the exercises I do is ask people what is their number one fear. And the workshops are for women, and 99% of the time, the answer is some version of becoming a bag lady. And I hear that answer from people who have $1,000 of savings, and I hear that answer from women who have literally several $1,000,000 in savings. And so the answer is fascinating to me because there's obviously a very guttural level of fear there, as well as a practical level of fear. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing, and then I think the great realignment is bringing up, is part of the reason so many, I mean, there are a variety of reasons why it's difficult to save. Number one, as we mentioned, we earn less. We women earn less than men. Two, women predominantly dominate the lower paying caring fields. Third, it's more expensive to be a woman. Like if you just go look at men's shampoo or men's shaving cream, it's a lot cheaper than stuff we buy.
Or even a
Um,
haircut.
or even a haircut, exactly. So there's like
What?
the female tax, and then there are other subtle things like if you're a guy, you can go to work with 2 suits, 5 shirts, and 5 ties, and you're done for the month. Like we women, like there's so much more. Like it is more expensive in so many ways to live like a woman, and on top of that, I think that there are social pressures that have elevated what all of us, men and women, think are reasonable um, lifestyles to be aspiring to. And my favorite example, because I'm obsessed with the British royal family, um, and all that's happening there, is if you look at Suits, the drama that Meghan Markle was in, and it's a legal show, and if you look at what the executive assistants are wearing in this show, which I adore, but the quality of the fabric, the cut, the fit, the shoes, it takes place in a city with uh, lots of humidity, yet all of the women clearly have just had a fresh blowout and new mani-pedi before heading into the office. So we see these images of what average life should look like. And then we try and live ours like that. And pretty soon there's nothing left for savings. And so, pre-pandemic, I would have sat down, and we can do it if you want, and run down through a bunch of practical tips to increase your savings. But increasingly, what I'm realizing is that maybe before we get to the tactical, we have to go in deep and say, like, what the heck do I want? Who do I want to be? Do I even want to be on social media? Do I even want to expose myself to these kind of images? Do I want to have a life where I'm so exhausted that all I can do is flop on the couch and watch Netflix night after night and get exposed to this stuff? Um, and so I think it's really raising a lot of questions of how we want to, what feeds our soul, and how we want to be in this world rather than what do we want to do in this world.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I think we come from this place of a lot of times we put so much pressure on the money and what we're earning and what we're spending and what's the ratio. And there's so many questions people have and how much should I have put away by X date, 50s, 40s, 30s, 12. Everyone's like, what do I have put away at each decade in my life? But that adds so much pressure to our lives. But for you, let's go even back further. And I do want to talk about those actionable steps. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But for you, calling yourself the MoneyZen, obviously this is coming from a very deep place. You have your own journey. You're very open about it. You shared just the pressure of being on social media. But our stories are so important. And how closely associated is your story to how you do your business in the MoneyZen? And you share very deeply about some of your own mental health battles.
Yeah, so there are two big elements that are actually quite timely. One is bullying, and the other is uh, mental illness. And I want to talk about both: being bullied as a young girl and being an adult living with bipolar 2. So, growing up, I grew up in a small town in Indiana, and there were no other girls named Manisha Thakor there. And I'm mixed race, and Indian women, we often have hair in places that most women don't want to have hair. And so typically Indian women will get it threaded. My mom is American. She had no idea what to do with a daughter who was growing facial hair in a white Midwestern town where no one had heard of threading. And so, and I was chubby and I was overweight and I had psoriasis and Coke bottle glasses, and I was the odd girl. I was the odd girl out, and the only place that I found refuge was in my studies. Um, and I can remember just growing up and, having this, uh, you know, kids calling me like cow butt and thunder thighs, and going into the dining hall, and like the girls spreading out their trays on the table so there wasn't room for me to sit down. And I mean, kids can be really mean, and this was
Yeah.
pre-social media. And so
Mhm.
that established in me this desire to be, with my parents' support, in terms of my dad taught me about money early on. My mom taught me that money gives women voices and choices. That patch of bullying made me decide I didn't ever want to be in a situation where I did not have the ability to step out and change my circumstances. And so that's one thing that really drove me to become interested in personal finance. And then the other is, like so many people, when I headed into college, I was struggling with depression and anxiety, and but this was in the early '90s, and I'd go to the student health center, and they'd be like, meditate, and for years as I was working, I would go and periodically try and get help, and I would get put on an antidepressant every so often. Other times I'd get put on an anti-anxiety medicine, but there was something really, really wrong with me. And it turns out I wasn't properly clinically diagnosed until I was in my 40s. Um, but they used to call it manic depression, where you cycle between these incredible highs and incredible lows. And in my case, I think part of the reason it took so long to diagnose was that when I was in a state of mania, my mania presented itself not as gambling or uh, uh, wanton, unsafe sexual habits. Mine presented itself as workaholism, which is why I wanted to go into kind of looping the two stories together. And I working in finance, when you stay up all night and work and pull all nighter after all nighter, they don't think you're crazy. That's called being a good employee. And so my manic behavior was rewarded, not thought that it was odd. And then when I would crash, which you inevitably do, I just thought, well, it's because I've been on a plane once every, 4 days for 6 months, and I've been working 100 hours a week, and of course I'm collapsing. Those two issues, bullying and also mental health, and particularly mental health, that is undiagnosed or undiscussed, have become huge, huge passions of mine, and are a reason why MoneyZen is so near and dear to my heart, because when your finances are in order, it gives you at least a leg up on helping address these other issues.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for being open and honest about that. It resonates with me so much of what you said, from the bullying as a kid, and from finding your we find our strength and our power in diving into things, and just it's the distractions have a tendency to make us feel better, but
Mhm.
sometimes they don't make us feel better, meaning we aren't getting
Right.
better by doing that. And we really have to have a very clear idea of what it means to be emotionally well, and practice active emotional well-being. So you've actually been able to parlay that and turn that into Money Zen, and create something really beautiful, but not before it impacted you in many ways. How are you now dealing with all that, knowing that, being aware of that? Are you still a workaholic?
So, yeah, no, I mean, I am actually I'm just starting work on my third book. I'm doing it with HarperCollins, and it'll come out in the summer of 2023. And I'm eagerly interviewing. And if anyone's listening and wants to come join in the project, I'd love to interview you too. I'm interviewing people who have been sucked into this vortex of money, work, success, more money, more work, more success, and are kind of stuck in that spiral and are unable to really feel emotional wealth, even if they have achieved financial health. And so, I mean, what I would say is, in terms of how I live my life today, I'm much more cognizant that, as somebody who is bipolar too, it's like I'm driving down a road, but and with bumper guards, but my bumper guards are narrower than the road a typical person drives down. And I have to be very careful if I take on too much work, if I don't sleep enough, if I don't eat right, if I don't exercise. These all start triggering something that is consistent in my head, which is the chemical imbalance that leads one to be at that, on the bipolar point of the mental health spectrum. And so I have learned to be more cognizant of daily and even hourly check-ins to make sure that I'm not veering off the rails. Because there were periods in the past where, I mean, literally, I did not want to be alive. Where I had, like, my car was like teetering on the rail, and it could have gone either way. And that is a place that I think more people get to than we talk about. Um, and um, I think, and we've seen the studies, mental health comes in a couple different varieties. One is a chemical imbalance, the other is situationally driven mental health issues, and sometimes it can be both. And we're just seeing an unprecedented amount of situationally induced mental health issues with COVID. That's just digging up all that stuff from the past, plus the current stuff, much of which is financially induced, losing, hours at work, wages going down, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that's why you do what you do and why I do what I do. I mean, and we're in such a pharma pushed society that, for me, taking the more holistic approach to helping people in their emotional well-being was from learning from how I dealt with my own. And I imagine for you as well. Every day it's a battle. I mean, we're human. It's not like we can heal ourselves to some level, but we constantly have to check ourselves as well, right? Because those little things do come up: the inner child, the inner belief system, the daily blunders and things that happen that might have not ever happened before, or re-triggering from things that have happened in our past. We have to be aware in order to find that realignment, right? So I appreciate you sharing that. I just want to take a moment to say thank you to Manisha for being here. If you are listening to this Holistically Speaking podcast, Manisha Thakor is joining me today, and we are talking all about financial wellness and financial well-being and how you can be empowered. You can introduce yourself, if you're not doing it already, to the Great Realignment. Manisha is a certified financial planner, as a certified financial accountant, and she is a rock star in the world of finance, especially for women, and the founder of MoneyZen, which is how I found her. And I just want to say thank you to our friends at Squadcast as well for holding space and allowing us to produce this great podcast for you listeners who are here listening. And if it resonates with you, or more than just you, it'll touch, move, and inspire someone, consider sharing it with one other person. So on that note, Miss Manisha, tell me about these actionable steps, because I know there's people waiting with bated breath to know, how do I make these changes?
Right. So the first thing that I want to tell everyone about is the 50-30-20 rule, which is something Elizabeth Warren came up with a couple decades ago when she was a bankruptcy lawyer at a bankruptcy professor at Harvard Law School. And she was observing people who made it through some of life's most difficult um, events, oftentimes medical issues and so forth, and didn't go bankrupt versus those who did. And what she observed was engaging in what she calls balanced spending, which has now been come to be known as the 50-30-20 rule, was the key. And what that rule says is, in an ideal world, and I emphasize ideal, 50% of your take home pay goes to needs, 30% towards wants, and a full 20% towards savings. Needs are housing, transportation, food, um, insurance, and mandatory childcare in order to work. Wants are fun, and the savings includes your near-term savings for your emergency fund, medium-term savings, things like putting money away for your kids to go to college or down payment on a home or car, and then long-run savings for retirement. Most people, when I say 20% in savings, say, Manisha, I want to shave off your eyebrows. Like, that's just not realistic. I'm
I
saving
think
like
you mean thread them.
that's right. Um, the, the average savings rate is in the low single digits right now in America. And so I just want to emphasize, if that's where you are not alone. And the power of increasing your savings simply by 1% a year is enormous. If you want to check, Google Save 1% More Calculator. New York Times has a wonderful free calculator that you can use to put in your actual numbers and see what happens if each year you simply increase your savings by 1%, how powerful that will be. But the key is this: if you are not saving, um, in a manner that is moving you towards what right now seems like an unbelievably huge goal. But if you can break it down into those tiny 1% increases, you'll be able to deal with one of the biggest shifts in society that we have seen, which is that our generation, so I'm 51, and the odds are that I will live in, quote, retirement for more years than I actually worked in the workforce. So, I mean, if I retired at 75 and I lived to 105, that means that for every year that I worked, not only did I need to pay for that year's living expenses, but I also needed to set aside enough and invest it so that that money would grow. So it, along with my Social Security, would be able to pay for my golden years. And so that's the rationale behind the seemingly incredibly huge number. So step number one is for people to know how important the 50-30-20 rule is. And thanks to the Google Net, simply hop on there and type in 50-30-20 rule, and you'll see a lot of stuff that I've written. You'll see a lot of stuff a lot of people have written about it. But that core concept is across the ages, I would say, the fundamental starting place. And then by decade, I can give, if we have time, I can give some specific steps by decades of how to get
Yeah.
prepared.
I think that's a great idea because I have a lot of listeners that are anywhere in their 20s all the way up to retirement age. And, if we can give them just a moment to bring
Yeah.
some clarity. Yeah, go for it.
Sure. So the first thing I'll say is personal finance is personal. And so while I'm going to talk about these in ages, sometimes somebody's financial age and chronological age are not the same. So if the tip helps, use it. So in your 20s, the single biggest thing is to learn how to live within your means, to set your life up so that you are in a 50-30-20 position. And what that means is your life is going to look nothing like your friends, nothing, because the vast majority of people are spending more than they earn. You come out of college, and for many of us, it, our sports centers in college are nicer than any gym will belong to until we're like in our mid 30s, so we come off these like beautiful campuses and we see these images and TV of young people living these gorgeous lives, and we put it on credit cards. But um, if you can come out knowing that the standard of living you remember when you left to go to college took your parents 30 or 40 years to build to get there. So you can't expect to graduate from college and live like that. So the simplest way, the action step is, they say it all the time, but it's correct. Pay yourself first. Each month, make sure a portion of your income is going into an emergency fund. First and foremost, you want to build up a $2,000 minimum emergency fund in your 20s. As you get older, you want to grow that to 3 to 6 months. The second thing is, if your employer offers a workplace retirement plan, you want to be putting as much money as you possibly can into that each month. Gold standard would be to start with 10%. If you start with it, you won't miss it because you've never had it in your paycheck. Um, and if you don't have one, not to worry, you can open up an individual retirement account. Great place to do it is at Vanguard, Betterment, Ellevest. Those are all three entities that I think do a great job at helping people get started with investing. Um, and then as you move into your 30s, the really big thing in your 30s is to make sure that you are appropriately managing debt loads. So nowadays, oftentimes, years past, people would come into their 30s and they would want to be buying homes and establishing families. But nowadays, people are coming into that with student loan debt burdens that are as big as mortgages. And so, one of the things I like to tell people in their 30s is, don't double down on the debt pain. There is another wonderful calculator put out by the New York Times called Rent versus Own. And you can pop your numbers in there and see for your local area if maybe it does make sense to rent longer rather than buy a home, which has been so ingrained in our brains is like the trigger to adulthood. But if you're struggling with student loan debts in your 30s, it financially can make much more sense to deal with that debt first before taking on a home. So that's a key thing to be thinking about in your 30s, as well as upping whatever savings rate you were doing in your 20s. Then, as we move into your 40s, the big fear in your 40s is lifestyle creep. It's you start to move into your higher earnings years, and the way I describe it is and then this is tongue in cheek, but you go to the store and you buy a new suit or outfit for work, and then you hop into your car and you're like, wait a minute, this outfit doesn't match this car. and then you need to upgrade the car, and then you drive, to your residence, and you're like, wait a minute, this car and that home, they don't match. I need a bigger home. And then you go, leave that home and prepare to go on a vacation. You're like, that hotel, that doesn't match me. I need a bigger hotel. And so your lifestyle starts to get bigger, and you start seeing this around you because so many people are living um, paycheck to paycheck across all income spectrums. I mean, literally, I meet people making $500,000 a year who are living paycheck to paycheck because they're overspending relative to the 50-30-20 rule. So in your 40s, avoid lifestyle creep because that's when it really starts to kick in. And then in your 50s, the big thing I see is people swinging for the fences. They're like, "Oh my god, I forgot to save. I'm 50 and I'm starting and I have nothing." And so I like to recommend two different books if you're in your 50s. The first is called Can I Retire? It's a 100-page book written by Michael Piper, Piper. It is the single best book I have ever read on preparing for retirement. If you read those 100 pages, you will know more than 90% of people about what you need to do given your personal circumstances, about how to get on track, or speed up the track if you're already on track with regards to um, retiring. And the compendium book to that is Investing Made Simple, which he also wrote. And again, it's less than 100 pages. You read those two books. In fact, if you read those two books in your 20s, you're going to be golden. But certainly, if you're in your 50s and thinking like, "I didn't start," that's the
Yeah.
place to go. And then, as you move into your 60s and beyond, that's the time to start thinking about estate planning and making sure you've got all of your documentation in order. And it doesn't have to be that hard. You certainly, going to a local estate attorney is the best way to get customized help, especially if your situation is a little more complex. But anybody can do it by going to an online service like LegalZoom and just making sure you have a basic will and a healthcare directive. So, if, God forbid, something happens to you and you aren't able to make health decisions on your own, financial power of attorney in case you become mentally incapacitated. And so that's what you want to think about in your 60s. Um, and the last things I'll say, in your 70s, I encourage you to start spending because what I've observed is that by the time you hit your 80s, you really slow down and just physically. And so a lot of the traveling and things, if you haven't done it by your 70s, go do it, go enjoy it, because the 80s tend to be a much less active phase in people's life. And the one thing I hear from people saying is, "Gosh, I'm glad I saved, but I wished in those latter years that I had spent more, and actually used it."
Enjoyed life.
Mhm,
Enjoyed what you worked
mhm,
so hard on. Yeah. I mean, it's
mhm.
in this society especially, it's like the live to work, and we need to be able to enjoy life, right? I mean, you're working so hard for what? For put having the big house, putting the kids through college, important things, right? But how much of it are you actually saying, patting yourself, being like, take a vacation, take a couple days off, buy yourself that nice thing that you want, but be reasonable about it, because what are you going to do with all that money in the bank and nothing to do with it except maybe just give it away, you know?
So the book that has most influenced my life, I love books, as you can tell,
I could
is
tell.
called Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez. It came out in early 1990s. I read it in 1992, and I've had the good fortune to get to know Vicki professionally as a colleague along the way. And I recommend that if I had to give one blanket piece of advice to everybody who, no matter what decade you are in, read Your Money or Your Life. Um, start to finish, it may take you 10 hours. It's the best 10 hours you will ever spend because it gets right to the heart of this issue of your money or your life. And it really provides some wonderful tools and mental models that you could use to help decide what is the right trade off. Um, and, it's not, the answer isn't always don't spend. For the long, all during COVID, I've been wearing the same hoodie and, uh, sweatpants. And I haven't bought a new top in ages, but I recently went to J. Crew and I bought this new top and it has like cool little, and the old me would have been like, well, that's frivolous. You don't, the hoodie was still working, but I feel good talking to you with this on. Now I didn't go buy 15 of them, but sometimes you need to treat yourself. And
Absolutely.
so I think what it is we live in such a disposable culture where we have acquired, acquired, acquired. And something in us knows that things aren't going to make us happy. And so it's finding that right balance between, because a few things will make you happy. But what's the right balance between a few that make you happy and so many that you feel like you're drowning in stuff, things, obligations.
And that goes back to the 50-30-20. That falls into your 30%. Why not treat yourself? When you treat yourself, you empower yourself, but when you do it with actionable steps, when you do it with the 50-30-20 rule, you're doing something actionable and that's progressive and positive, and it's going to empower us more to be better in our financial wellness and planning, and you just feel good. We want to feel good. Don't we want to feel good? you know?
We do, and one of the exercises I always like to encourage people to consider doing is to write down on a piece of paper. Don't make it complicated, like literally, or you can do it in your smartphone and then print it out. Um, Everything you spend money on for as long a period, as close to a week as you can get.
Mhm.
Um, and at the end, print it off, or take out that piece of paper, and you don't add up anything. All you do is you take out a yellow highlighter and you highlight anything that you spent money on that didn't bring you joy. And that is
Mm,
such a wonderful way to find money leaks. When people tell me like, I don't even know where, I'd like to save 1% more, but I don't know where I'm going to find it. And sometimes the yellow highlights are in places where there's nothing we can do about it. Like nobody likes paying their utilities, and
right.
we can all use a reminder to go check in and see if we can renegotiate. But um, certainly go do that. But the really interesting stuff comes when you go down the list and you start seeing like, oh, taking my kids to soccer, now that sometimes outdoors with masks you can play soccer, and the kids hate the soccer coach, and I hate driving them there. Like, why are we spending money
Mhm.
on this? Or as we start to go back out and meet friends for drinks, ask yourself like, did I actually enjoy being with this group of people? And the answer may be yes. Heck, keep doing it. But the answer might also be no. Like, this is just a group of people we always used to get together with more habit. And you know what? I really don't feel great about myself when I come away from my conversations with this group. And so, as you go down what you spend using solely the lens of joy as your metric, you'll start to find some places. I've yet to meet anyone who hasn't been able to come back from the joy audit and find some money that's leaking, that can be redirected to savings or back into that 30% pile.
I love that, the joy audit. That's I love that. And yellow is a very cheerful
Yeah.
color. So highlighting in yellow, it's got a mental impact as well. That's a great idea. I actually might have to do that, especially after this week's spending. So that's a great tip. I was gonna say we have a bunch of folks that were gonna ask questions or ask questions, submitted them to Holistically Speaking, but you answered every single one of them within this conversation. So to all of you that submitted your questions, you got all your answers right there. But thank you to everyone that did submit. I think there was maybe one question, and that was the 50-30-20, the change in that with what we've dealt with the pandemic as we're moving in this
Hmm.
great realignment. Is it going to be that different? Does it still stand this balance?
I think it stands more than ever. And we're at this turning point where we can either go back and keep doing things the way we were, as things slowly start to open up, or we can take the slightly harder course and just ask the hard questions. For example, uh, like I'll just give some questions that I'm asking in my own life. I have reached a level of financial stability from following my own advice. Why am I continuing to work at the pace that I'm working? Why am I taking on any client work that does not light my soul? Why am I on social media? Like I have thin skin. I don't like it when people say mean things to me. And why am I doing that? Is there another way I can help people without being in the social media world? Why do I put the people I love most at the end of my list of emails I'm going to reply to each day and not at the top? I mean, so these are all the kinds of questions that together, why am I spending why am I spending money on business travel, but I haven't yet done anything to nurture myself since we've had a little bit of an opening in the COVID rules? So these are the kinds of questions that I personally am asking myself. And what I think is going to happen is that what I have sensed in me is that I have brought too many things into my world, too many ideas, too many people, too many books, too many subscriptions, too much of everything. And that I personally am going through a shedding. And I think I'm going to come out of this with much less and yet much more. And I feel like that's collectively where I see a lot of people going is we're going to get rid of so much stuff, whether that's emotional material or obligations, that we will come away feeling so rich with so much less in our lives than we ever thought possible.
There's so much more of that minimalism that we're seeing now with people, getting rid of a lot and
Yeah.
just realizing they can live with less. It's kind of sometimes I'm kind of jealous. I watch these people doing van life. I'm like, that sounds kind of awesome. Like just not having all this stuff. Ugh, amazing. But I like to do a quick game with my guest real quick, and then we'll do some final thoughts. But I do have one question for you that's mine. Now you do a lot of TV work. Have you ever been
Yeah.
on Have you ever done Room Rater? Ever been rated on Room Rater?
No. No.
Oh, okay. I'm just
Do
curious. You know
tell.
what it is? Room Rater is just
I
one of those
don't.
online sites where they kind of I hate saying it. They kind of judge your background if you're a television personality or
Oh
on-air
God.
guest expert.
Ah!
I was just curious, and I'm always wondering for my face to pop up. Good lord! But you have a nice backdrop. I was just going to let you know that. Yeah, I have
Thank
a
you.
feeling. I have a feeling they might rate you well. It's just fun. You see it all over Twitter all the time. So be mindful. You might have been rated. Who knows? But on that note, let's play this little game real quick. So I'm going to throw out a word. Just come back to me with the first word that comes to mind. These are just words that I write down while we're chit chatting. Okay,
Mhm.
quick, rapid fire. Here we go. Money,
Freedom.
bully,
Mean.
realignment,
Fresh air.
wellness.
Ah.
Oh, I like that. Joy,
Smiles.
savings,
Safety.
zen.
Bliss.
You're good. And you're probably the first one that ever used like an exclamation. Ah. That felt zen in itself. So, Manisha, thank you so much for being here. I just want to leave listeners with a final thought. What would your final thought be to those who are listening?
Um, Investing in your financial knowledge is one of the best investments you can ever make. And the most effective way to do it is baby step by baby step. So I don't work with individuals directly anymore. I have nothing to sell you, but I like to share information. So if you're on this journey, please go to
Mhm.
moneyzen.com and sign up for my monthly newsletter where I strive to share the most educational and empowering things I have found in the past month around women, economic empowerment, money zen, and realigning ourselves.
Yes, we're going to share all those links for you, how you can get in touch with Manisha, how you can join her on social media, how you can connect with her, get on her newsletter. So you're getting all these actionable tips constantly as the world is changing, right? So thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure.
Hilary, thank you so much for having me on.
There were so many delicious nuggets that Manisha shared during this episode, and it is all for the taking on the podcast page. From her books and website recommendations to connecting with her personally on the MoneyZen website, I highly recommend signing up for her newsletter so that you are always rich with information on being financially healthy. You can also connect with her on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You'll find all those links on the podcast page as well. And while you're giving Manisha all these loves and likes and follows, be sure to connect with me as well on social media if you haven't done so already at Hilary Russo. And I am now sharing even more brain candy on TikTok at HIListically Speaking. So let's have some fun. And if you need additional support on your wellness journey, reach out to me, book a complimentary call. I'm always listening. We will go from there. If you love this episode, then pass it along. When you share it with one other person, you're making a difference in someone's life and you might not even know it. And consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this podcast right now so that you never miss an episode. HIListically Speaking is produced by Alan Seals with music by Lipbone Redding and recorded on Squadcast. So let's make the new year really count by adding extra G's in your wallet and joy in your life. Thanks for listening. Be kind to your mind, and don't forget to laugh.